Well, students, I'll see you on Zoom very soon, but before we join that Zoom and answer some questions, like always, when we get to the end of a chapter or a topic, I like to do those additional notes. So I've reread through the chapter, and there's a couple of things I just wanted to add, and I just wanted to amplify and highlight some key words that maybe I haven't emphasized enough along the way, and I really want these keywords coming through in your writing of responses. So here we go. Let's start with a couple of screenshots of the actual textbook itself. And the first one here is about core temperature of the body, and we spoke about the body overheating, and we spoke about being in the aerobic energy system and the issues that the body will face when we're in the aerobic energy system about creating heat as a byproduct. And I think the word here that is really critical is hyperthermia. Okay, so when the body is overheating, hyperthermia is a major issue. We've mentioned the word homeostasis quite a lot, and that is the body wanting to stay within its regular body temperature, so 36.5 to 37.5 degrees Celsius. But once we're actually producing too much heat, and if there is an issue with the cooling down mechanisms, such as dehydration, then we end up in this hypothermia state, okay, overheating. Now, the next thing that I wanted you to add is this idea of thermoregulation. So homeostasis refers to the entire body staying within its regular functioning range. But if we are just talking about thermoregulation, we're just talking about the temperature mechanisms within the human body and trying to ensure that the body stays within that 36.5 to 37.5. That is our body going through thermoregulation, and that is the body trying to avoid hyperthermia. And the direct link with that is dehydration. Okay. The next one that we're adding to our notes is this idea of the central governor mechanism. Now, I've never seen this written in an exam, but it's just a nice little one to understand for if they were to ever throw it in there. So this is actually referring to that safety mechanism within the brain, and I've mentioned in class specifically, and I know that I have over YouTube videos as well, that the brain tries to keep the body safe. This homeostasis idea, regular functioning. If the body overheats and the body wants to start shutting down, or if the body ends up having too much hydrogen ions in the muscle and acidosis is taking place, this central governor mechanism, that is the safety within the brain that switches things off. Okay, so it is a calculation that the brain makes saying, this is going on in the muscle, I need to stop. This is happening in the stomach, I need to stop. I'm not getting enough oxygen to my brain, I need to stop. Okay, it's a central governor mechanism. Now, this is just an interesting little list. This is our list of major electrolytes. Now, I've mentioned that during sweat, we can actually dehydrate because we lose water and fluid within our body, but we also lose electrolytes. And so part of dehydration is the fact that these 4 major electrolytes are being lost, or 5. Now, just a very quick summary. Sodium and chloride work very closely with the water balance within the body. So if we are losing a lot of sodium and chloride within our sweat, the body won't hold water and fluid as well, so we'll dehydrate quicker. Okay. The next one is about potassium. Now, potassium's main role is to do with glucose and glycogen. And so if we're sweating out a lot and losing potassium, we're actually going to struggle with glycolysis. We're going to struggle to transport glucose around the body and get it to those working muscles. So we're actually going to feel like we don't have much energy for ATP resynthesis. The next 2 go hand in hand together, calcium and magnesium. They are to do with the muscles contracting and relaxing. They're to do with enzymes, and they're to do with the breakdown of energy, and also the muscle being able to relax so that it can receive the next nerve impulse so that it can do the next muscle contraction. So if when we're sweating, we're losing a lot of calcium and magnesium, that is going to take place. This is a bit of a language one as well. I've used the word cool down a fair bit, and I'm hoping that students don't use the word active recovery. There are 2 different aspects to this. When we are completing a cool down, and we are completing our recovery mechanism using a cool down. A cool down is something that takes place directly at the end of that exercise bout, okay? And it is a lighter version of the same movements that you were just completing. Okay, now I might have used the word interchangeably in the wrong way around, but the direct language use of active recovery is referring to being active on your rest days in order to promote healing and recovery in the body. So cool down is the same thing as active recovery, but it is happening at different times. Cool down is happening directly at the end of exercise to keep those acute responses a little bit higher, keep the oxygen and the blood flow happening inside the body at elevated levels, and trying to oxidize the hydrogen ions and flush out and shuttle some of that lactate to the liver for recovery purposes. But the active recovery is trying to help with that venous pooling, trying to help with the DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, and that is that next day. Now, this is not appropriate for all athletes. It is for professional athletes and athletes who train regularly. And basically, the guideline here is if it adds pain or stress, avoid it. Once you're acclimatized to it, then after a big event or a game, the next day, going for a light jog or moving the body on a bike or an elliptical trainer or something like that, or a rowing machine at low intensity, can actually help regulate the blood flow and help restore the body to resting levels. Okay, so active recovery and cool down. Now, this is just a chunk of writing from towards the end of chapter 8, and they mention hypertonic sports drinks. I want to flip over to something I've found on Google for you in a moment, but there's a little bit of hidden gem I find in this paragraph here, and that's where it's referring to insulin and it's referring to protein and carbohydrate. Let me try and explain this to you. Okay, where are we? So, essentially, this is the situation. When we finish exercise, our body has a little bit more insulin tolerance, or it's working better with insulin. Insulin works hand in hand with glucose and carbohydrates and glycogen. So basically, once we've finished exercising, the best time to be putting carbohydrate back into our body is straight away at the end. Now, what we understand from this is that we should be consuming carbohydrates directly after exercise, specifically if that exercise has been prolonged exercise and you've burnt through a lot of glucose and glycogen. But what they've actually found is that if you consume protein at the same time, it lengthens out the effects of insulin in the body. So by consuming protein directly after exercise, not only are we getting the repair to the damages of the muscle tissue, but we're also lengthening out the insulin period so that when we do consume the carbohydrates, they are stored as glycogen and transported as glucose more efficiently for longer within the body. So the best recovery and refueling for the body at the end of exercise, if we have burnt through a significant portion of our glucose and glycogen stores, will be to consume both protein and carbohydrate immediately after exercise. Now, consuming a protein shake is great because it's in a liquid form, and some protein shakes will also have carbohydrate content in them. Therefore, it goes and it gets absorbed almost like a high GI carb quite quickly. The problem is that some of those essential amino acids that come from the actual protein itself by having a bit of chicken or fish or whatever it might be can be lost. So the sort of the processing version of the protein shake has its benefits, but also nothing really substitutes being able to eat really high protein rich natural foods directly after exercise. Now, about the sports drinks, I just wanted to flip over to this. The word osmolality I've mentioned a couple of times, and I want you to start thinking about putting it into your writing as well. It refers to how much of one substance is dissolved into another. Okay, and the reason why it's important is when we start talking about drinking sports drinks, for recovery purposes, when we're refueling and rehydrating. Now, there's 4 different things that you can consume here. You can consume water. Water itself has 0 carbohydrates. The next one that you can consume is a hypotonic hypotonic, the word O meaning low. So hypotonic has very low level carbohydrates in it, okay? When you consume hypotonic drinks, you are essentially going to be mainly restoring the fluids that are lost from dehydration in the body, but it will give you a little bit of carbohydrate, and that carbohydrate will be absorbed quite quickly because of its osmolality blended in with water. Now, if you consume a isotonic drink, isotonic drinks have between 4 to 8% carbohydrates, and that is a similar osmolality to what our blood is inside our human body. And so if you want a similar portion of carbohydrate to blood content, then what you would want is a similar portion of carbohydrate to fluid content. Therefore, the body will find it quite easy to ensure that it's not overindulging in that carbohydrate. So that's the isotonic drinks. They're also jam-packed with electrolytes as well most of the time, and so that's a good option for people who are losing some of those electrolytes that were mentioned earlier. Finally, we have our hypertonic drinks, and that has a greater than 8% carbohydrate content, which is actually more than what our bloodstream is actually taking. So it's just referring to the amount of carbohydrate in the liquid content and how thick that liquid content is full of carbohydrate content, and that's how easily our body can break it down. So I'll see you on Zoom momentarily to work through some guided questions.